Welcome into another episode of They've Got Now. I am really excited to be joined today by one of the great coaches in D1 right now, Tomekia Reed from over at Jackson State. Just to list off a couple of things that she and JSU have done. Just finished up year 6 in Jackson, 3 straight 20-plus win seasons. There have been 5 in Jackson from 1990 to 2018 before you got there. Made the NCAA tournament 3 times in the last 4 years. 5 SWAC regular season titles in a row, 83-4 in conference play since the 2019-20 season. Point blank period, you know how to win, and you're doing an awesome job with Jackson State. Coach, how are you doing?
Doing good. I am extremely happy to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to have you on. Obviously, I've loved watching you guys for quite a bit, and especially with what this season was, going undefeated in the SWAC play, running through the SWAC title in the tournament. And the SWAC tournament was one of the best tournaments to watch in March, period. Alcorn State had their fun run, and that was totally unexpected for me. And, just kind of seeing how everything played out was an absolute blast. But I think first question I have for you is just, now that you've gotten to sit with the season for a little bit, and, obviously you were up here in Cleveland for the Final Four, ran a coaching clinic at WBCA, if I remember correctly. How are you kind of feeling now that you've had a little bit of time in between?
You know, um, I'm one of those coaches who does not take a lot of time reflecting. I
Hmm.
quick try to move forward in terms of bringing in recruits, seeing what areas of the program that needs to be improved. So I've kind of been thinking about that a lot lately, but I will say this has been one outstanding season. I mean, we've had other years in our program where we've gone undefeated. We've had years where we've won big in tournaments where we have competed against Power Five teams and won some of those games. But this year was really special. It was special because we had a new roster of a lot of talent, players who were outstanding at the previous schools that they played for, had to come to Jackson State and learn a new role. And so to get that to all come together as quick as we were able to do so made this a really, really special year. And so as I sit back and think about what we've gone through as a team, what we've grown through as a team, I'm just extremely proud. I'm proud of what our players have been able to do. Our season motto, we built it around Iwo Jima. We lost something that we had to go back and get. And so we took pictures of, I had the flag, the JSU flag, and we were going to regain our territory, because of when we lost it last year. And so that was kind of like the motto going into this season, the takeover. And I think our players held to that, coming in, taking over, and regaining what we had lost previously.
I love that. And especially like you mentioned with the new roster coming in, like uh Andriana Event was one of my favorite players to watch this year, and her growth. I mean, seeing like obviously she was very good at Texas Southern, but like you said, you never know quite how somebody's going to translate coming into a new team, and she fit in so well. Like obviously, I think you guys are well known for the size that you bring and how you protect the rim, but I think the guard play is what really sets you guys apart, especially like, you know, containing you guys off the dribble is a nightmare. Everybody can create, everybody can get to the rim, everybody can pull up. Like it is a really hard style to defend.
Yeah, and Avon, she was a really good player at Texas Southern, like you said.
Hmm.
And when she came here, we had to make her tougher. We had to make her resilient. Avon would give up. And I can remember her first practice here. She was like, "Coach, I'm seeing stars." You know, we were like, you know what? You better connect the stars, connect the dots, and get back out here. We were just really tough. And, she just kind of, came in and adjusted to what we were asking. And you're right. Our guard play in our conference has to be good. If you got good bigs on the inside, that's a plus. But if your guards aren't, elite, you'll struggle in our conference. And so we were just really excited that we were able to bring in big size guards who can play out on the perimeter, who can also post up, and have post players who can protect the rim and be dominant on the inside as well. I really recruit, my staff recruit to be great in the conference, but we also recruit to be competitive outside of our conference play. It's not just enough to win the conference. We want to be great outside of that. And so that's why we recruit the way we recruit. When I first came to Jackson State, the fours in our conference were like 5'8", 5'9", really small guards. And I was like, you can't beat a Power 5 with a 5'9" four player. So we had to go out and get some height at every position and be competitive. And so that was our game plan when it came to recruiting.
Yeah, and I mean, especially going off that too, when you first come in and take the job, like obviously I know you'd been a head coach for a little bit at Heinz Community, but like how do you, when you come in and like, okay, we're here, we want to build this to be something special. And obviously you guys have done that and are still doing that. But like how do you kind of set what that's going to look like and how does that change over the course of time?
Well, when I came in, when I interviewed for the job, I talked about what I wanted to accomplish in the 4 years that I would be here. And I had laid out and articulated very detailed what each year will look like. We fortunately accomplished year 3 in year 1. And it took off from there. And I told my staff, I said, y'all, we can win big and win fast. We will have success our entire time here at Jackson State. And so what that looked like in year 1 was recruiting our state, recruiting the best players in state, putting fans in the stands, and just establishing a tough, resilient culture. I tell people winning big is a personality. You have some coaches who will keep you in the middle of the pack. You have some coaches who, just be competitive. And you have those personality types that are going to keep you at the top because of the aggression. Pat Summitt, Gino, Dawn Staley, Tara,
Mhm.
Vivian Stringer. Those were very aggressive, matter of fact, detailed coaches. And so that's what type of program we run here, the exact same. And the players they bought into the vision. When you can create the vision, write it down, make it plain. Obviously, that's what it say in the Bible, and get everybody to buy into what it looks like and how they can contribute to that. I think that helped us to be successful early on.
No, absolutely. And like you mentioned too, with that, going off the toughness piece, I know your clinic was about teaching toughness, if I remember correctly. So like, how do you do that? Because I think it's one thing to tell people, like, especially with rebounding, like everybody thinks like, okay, well, just rebound better. But there's a lot
Yeah.
more that goes into just rebounding better or being tougher. So like, how do you kind of teach and coach toughness and get more out of people from that?
Well, it's zero tolerance. You can't wake up and be average. I tell our players
Mhm.
all the time, why would you just wake up to exist? You want to come up, you want to wake up to dominate. You want to be dominant. And so we just look for areas to help our players improve and be great. And again, being extremely detailed. Yes, it's a rebound, just go get it. But, you know, what do I have to do to go get this offensive rebound? What do I have to do to get this defensive rebound? Is there anything extra? Yes, it is. And let's break this down. And so we work on the small details over and over and over and over again. And just having small room for error. When you have error, people kind of sit on it and, oh, I messed up. No, let's go. Let's move on. It's you messed up. Let's get it right. And so just having that accountability factor there and not allowing them to sit in pity, pushing them to be great, being extremely detailed with what we want them to go do, and drilling that. You know, I tell our players all the time, you can't get tired of going to do things the right way. You can't get tired of repetition. Repetition brings consistency, and consistency brings success. So you can't get tired of doing this over and over again, because I'm going to do it over and over till we get it right, And so the players are really locked into that accountability piece.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because like you mentioned with consistency, like I'm 26, so a lot of my 20s has been trying to learn how to be more consistent, right? And I think I used to think you could just kind of out talent everything or outwork it, but really it's about being as consistent as possible. I think some of the most effective people I know, it's not that they work less, but they're just smarter about how they go about doing things. And when you talk about the consistency part, how has that maybe changed up for you in the last couple of years? Like, obviously, I think you've been, from what I know, have been a very consistent person the entire time. But like, how does consistency change from when you first got to Jackson State to now?
Well, I would say some factors don't change. Your toughness,
Hmm.
your resilience, passion, your grit. those things kind of stay there. Now they may increase, but they don't decrease. But I will say that recruiting better athletes each year, it's my goal to recruit better than what I have on the team. And some of the players get offended by that. But like I tell them, if I can recruit better than the best player on my team, we're unstoppable. And so that's the piece I think changes, and we have to be okay with that and okay with mixing talent. So I think when you talk about change, that's the change that we see a lot. The players that we bring into the program, what they are capable of doing once they come into the program, and getting the players to see what's on the inside more than what they may see in themselves, getting them to see something different. So I think that piece is what changes. But in terms of, my approach, it doesn't change much. Now, I will say this, the transfer portal is big. And so you have to recruit your players every day. You have to be tough, but you have to have that love too. And so we certainly keep that mix in there. And I think when you talk about changing, that has changed across the board for all coaches. Some of those tough coaches who were just strictly like this, we have, come down a little bit more to our players' level and have a different type of understanding. If not, you'll lose your player mid-season and they'll jump into the portal and transfer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think seeing how everybody's had to change through that has been really interesting. Because I was not in college during the transfer portal era. So, seeing the way that's all changed. Because I remember, I can't remember the dude's name, but there was somebody who transferred Eastern Washington to Oregon out of football. And that was the first time anybody had ever grad transferred, or that it became that big of a deal. And ever since then, the way that it's changed since I think it was 2016, which wild to think about how long ago that is, but also shouldn't feel that long ago. But yeah, it's interesting. But I also feel like you've been on top of the portal for a while in terms of your approach, it feels like. Obviously, I mean, Amisha was incredible, one hell of a player. You look at what Angel has brought in, same thing with Daphne White. The list goes on and on for your roster, but was that something coming in right away at Jackson State that you knew, okay, we really need to be on top of bringing in top competitors that are maybe could be a factor in another setting?
Absolutely. When I came in, I saw the conference was really big on signing high school players.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew we couldn't win quickly with high school student athletes because they normally come around their junior and senior year, unless you get a top 10 in the country. And we know that isn't happening at the HBCU level. And so I told my coaching staff, I want to recruit junior college players and I want to look at getting transfers in. And obviously my first year was before the transfer portal. So we were just getting players that, we knew, like Amisha. Amisha had quit school.
Mm-hmm.
She was at home doing nothing. And I said, Amisha, come play for me at Jackson State. I got the job. And she was like, Coach, I don't like running. And I said, well, don't worry about running. We'll figure that part out. Just come to school. And she said, all right, I'll come play for you. Maybe an hour later, she sent me a text message of a pregnancy test. And she said, Coach, I'm pregnant. And I told her, I don't care. I still want you in school. Come get an education. Come get your degree. You owe that to yourself. And so she did that, and she had her baby, and she came back and said, Coach, I'm ready to play basketball. And so being patient with her worked out in our favor. It worked out in her favor, and so having those transfers really helped us have that quick success. And those junior college players bringing in a lot of experience to the floor. And we had some high school players there that we developed over time. Some made it, some didn't. But that was really important. We wanted to do and be different from what other schools in the conference was doing so we can have that early success.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting too, because like you mentioned, the development aspect is I think that's something people are still figuring out and what that looks like and means in how the game is right now. But one thing that always stands out about the way that you guys play is you play deep. You play deep every night. You bring everybody out on the court. And I think, at least to me, that feels like the direction more and more people are going to go, because everybody needs playing time to a degree. If you want to get better, you have to play, but also to keep people happy, they got to play. So was that something that you just kind of instilled early, or is that something that's kind of developed more for you over time?
The year before we lost in the tournament, I didn't have any depth. Our bench was it stopped at about the seventh player.
Yeah.
So my staff did a great job in bringing in more players who could play. Now, we had 17 people on our team coming into this year. And like you said, these transfers were like, Coach, I want to play. So it was a problem initially. And so what we had to do was split the time up. We literally said, we want this player playing this many minutes, and each player knew how many minutes that they had to play effectively. And so we told the players, if you're not playing this effectively, you'll just sit down. So that made them work harder. That made them play more together as a team and accept the role that they were given. And so as the season went on, we struggled preseason this past year, but as it went on, coming into the conference, everybody understood what we had to do in terms of who would come off the bench, how many minutes each player was going to play. They all bought into it late. So you're right. When you bring in a bunch of transfers, it's really, really hard. But my staff, and we did a great job of just kind of mixing that thing up and demanding the players to play hard. I mean, if they don't run the floor, come sit down. But Coach, you said I was going to play. Yeah, but you're not playing hard enough, and we made our players play to exhaustion. When you're on the floor, you have to leave it all on the floor. We have plenty of players on the bench that can come in and play after you. So we just had a little system going, but they didn't pick that system up until late.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like, hey, I'm not running either, so you can come sit next to me. So totally understand. I mean, I think like you're saying too, that's what's so interesting as well. Like, I think a lot of people watching games, like they can see like a player's talented, but don't always, everybody's going to question, rotation decisions and this and that. But like, I feel like so much goes into that outside of just what's happening in games. Like, okay, what does your practice look like? How consistent are you in practice? What do you bring to the table every day in practice? Like, there's just so much more into it. And it's always interesting to hear from people how they kind of handle that stuff.
Yeah, we definitely tell our players, you don't get playing time based on the game. You get playing time what you do in practice. And a lot of our roles were defined by the athlete themselves. And I tell the players, I don't give roles. You create the roles based on how hard you go and how consistently hard you're going. And a lot of our roles are defined in the summertime. And I tell them that. And so, you know, I just like to sit back and watch what they develop to become. I like to sit back and watch what the team identity ends up becoming, based on how they pull together to play. So you're right. Everything happens in practice and not game day.
Yeah, I'd love to expand on that too, in terms of mentioning like how roles are defined. Because again, like I think people can have in their heads like what it should look like or what it could look like. But how, like you mentioned watching that develop. How, because I think again, like people can picture what basketball could be or it looks like, but how do you get that over to a college student? Because I think again, like that is a lot easier said than done. Like communication, I think every time you talk about a great program, yes, X's and O's and having talent are important, but having the best communication tends to be the most important thing with being a successful program. So how do you kind of communicate roles and work on that?
Yeah, I tell the players right away, I'm not going to give you a role. You're going to have the opportunity to define your own role. And so when I watch a player for an entire week jog the floor, come in being average, I tell them, okay, I see the role you're developing for yourself, and that's going to be a role to have you a great seat on the bench. And well, coach, what do you mean? Well, you hadn't gone full speed the entire time you've been here. So you're telling me that this is the role you want to sit on a bench. And so now it becomes, no, I'm better than that, coach. I can rebound. I can do this. I can do that. So, okay, show me. So when the players get out and they actively show, they can grab rebounds, they can push the ball in transition, and they do it consistently, then I'll come back and sit down with them and say, hey, this is what I've seen you do, and this is what my expectations are of you moving forward. Now, I've been the type of coach where, and I've seen a lot of coaches give roles based on recruiting. Okay, you were a 5-star athlete in high school, and you did this in high school. This is what that I want you doing the exact same thing here. But it's different. High school play is different from college play. You know, do they mix well with the people who are currently on the team? So it changes. You just got to see how it develops. And so I normally don't have those meetings with my players until late. about roles. I give them a chance, a fair chance to develop the player that they want to be.
No, I really appreciate that. And like you mentioned with the season too, I think you guys played probably going back through because so I do bracketology over at the Athletic, so it's my job to stay on top of every team and what they're doing. And I think you guys played probably the hardest 40-day stretch out of just about anybody in non-conference. Did not come back to play a game in Jackson from I think the middle of November until the first week of January. And also played some really damn good teams mixed in there. And I think part of what's tough, like obviously, like I know you guys ended up going winless in that stretch. Other than, I mean, you beat St. John's. St. John's was very tough. But you look top to bottom, like Kansas State, Texas, Mississippi State, Miami, but you could really see the growth throughout. And I think one of the things, like again, like people can look at, like, well, look at you, it translated to the SWAC, and you guys were able to be extremely successful there. But how do you manage the highs and lows that come with playing such an intense non-conference? Because I think, again, like you can point to people like, all right, well, trust me, when we get to January, this is going to have us ready. But I feel like sometimes, it depends on the athletes, on like you mentioned with the toughness piece, and like being able to learn and grow through some of those things.
Yeah, our players understand what the standard is to be a part of Jackson State women's basketball. They understand that we are a program who goes out to do things that's never been done. We are a program that actively seeks to win big games versus Power Five and high mid-major schools. My players also understand that average teams, bottom of the SEC teams, bottom of the Big 12 teams are not going to play us. They understand that we may have to travel across the country to get 4 or 5 games, but we have to go and be competitive. They understand that. And that comes with recruiting those athletes who's played at that level before, who understands what it is to be competitive in that nature, who are not afraid to go out and play those top teams. And so one thing that I did this past year, because the previous year had worn us out completely. We were at Washington State, Oregon State, UCLA. I mean, we lived on the West Coast. And so our players were tired. So coming into this year, I had games and I said, okay, you guys, who do you want to play? And so I made them a part of the process. So now we put them on the schedule. You got to go compete. This is who you said you wanted to play. These what our options were. You chose them. Now we got to go out and be competitive. And so, we do some different things to kind of make sure the girls are ready for those type of competitions. We don't operate like your typical HBCU. We try to operate at a very elite style in terms of recovery, and things of that nature. So our players are ready to compete against those bigger schools. Now, we went backwards. I wanted to be a whole lot more competitive in those games than we were. And I struggled with losing to Texas by 40 points or so. I struggled with the way we got beat by Kansas State. I thought we had built the program to a level that we can really go in and be competitive. And so, but the struggle was players and chemistry. Transfer players and the chemistry. That's what our early struggle was. And so playing those big games helps us tremendously in conference.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think part of exactly like you're saying, because like I know the Texas game and K-State did not go how you guys wanted, but like watching like the Oregon State game, I know the final score, they kind of ran away with it the last couple minutes, but that was like, could tell right off bat. I was like, all right, this is going to be a fight. There's absolutely I mean, like, because I know a bunch of players in Oregon State, and they said you guys were one of their toughest opponents this year, was having to go up against you guys. And then Miami and Mississippi State, I think if there were just a couple less turnovers, I look at both those games and I'm like, I honestly think you guys were right there to win both those games. So it's like, going back through exactly. And like you mentioned too, to go backwards as well, because you mentioned, teams from the bottom of the SEC or the ACC do not want to play us. And I just can't, not to get on my soapbox, but I cannot reiterate that enough for people who like every year when the bracket stuff starts coming out, like towards March Madness, people are like, oh, well, especially like Fairfield got it a lot this year. Everybody's like, oh, well, Fairfield should have played a harder schedule. They should have done this. I'm like, dude, the problem is people know that these teams are going to be good. Like you Fairfield, looking at any of the Toledo, one of the top mid majors, like all the top mid majors do not get the benefit of the doubt from teams because it does not end up quote unquote helping that team, or in their eyes it doesn't. So it's hard to schedule when you're at a mid major. Like it is really hard to schedule. So I can't iterate that enough for people. It is mostly not in control of coaches in terms of getting that kind of stuff on schedule.
Yes, that's right. It's really tough, and we had to be creative. That's why we jumped into the WNIT tournament the previous year, where we beat UL Lafayette and Texas Tech, and this year we jumped into the Puerto Rico tournament where we had Puerto Rico D2 school, UCF, St. John's. We had to jump in there because on a regular day St. John's probably wouldn't have played us, and on a regular schedule, and we were supposed to be in the Bahamas tournament this past year, and some teams said that they didn't want to play us. So the head assigner called and was like, "Hey, coach, we're going to go with a different HBCU." And I was like, "That's not fair to us." And so it's really tough. You appreciate that respect on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like we work hard just like everybody else work hard. How is losing to us such a bad thing? We have a top 100 net ranking. Other HBCUs net ranking is 200, 275, 300. Here we are in the top 100s. We've been 97. We've been 74. I think this past year we were 100. So we are competitive. We were the number 10 team in the country in mid majors by College Insider. So we're not a rinky-dink program. If you lose to us, it's a good game. That's how I see it. But
I agree.
Of course, they don't see it that way.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on net. I think net sucks for the most part because it just doesn't do a good enough job of looking at things. Because I could point blank say you guys were much better than the 100th team in basketball this year, but that they did. The committee doesn't ask me. But moving on from there to mentioning the SWAC, I feel like one of the things that was really fun this year was watching how some teams in the SWAC as a whole grew. Like Grambling had one of their best seasons in my lifetime in Courtney's first year there. So I'm really excited to watch them keep growing. Like Southern is always really tough and solid. UAPB obviously under Dawn now, she's at Alabama A&M, which will be fun to watch. And we mentioned Alcorn's run to the SWAC title game, but just watching the way that the SWAC has continued to develop since you've been there. What has that kind of been like for you? And getting to, especially like we mentioned, the SWAC tournament was awesome. Every single game you guys had with Grambling and Southern this year was a blast to watch. So yeah, what was that kind of like getting to witness this year?
When we came in, the average deficit between SWAC opponents and Power 5 institutions were 35 points. And so in our third year, we moved that deficit to 12 points, 6 points. Like we changed that deficit. What I saw when I first came into the conference was teams that were excited for conference play and just kind of went through preseason to get the monies for guaranteed monies for the program to survive. You saw no real competition, nobody really thinking they could win those games. And so when we came in, we changed the landscape in terms of recruiting. We changed the landscape in the style of play. And so, now it's like, okay, everybody is on board. It's the same. Because I'm telling you, you want your conference to be respected. You want your conference to be competitive. The lower levels, if we can compete and be great, we help move women's basketball to another level. We don't want to be the conference that hold women's basketball down from improving, from getting better. And so you want your teams to not be in the bottom 300s of the net ranking. You want 100s, 200s. You want your conference to be competitive. And so to see Grambling win a P5 game, to see Southern win a good P5 game, Arkansas Pine Bluff, it made me extremely proud, because now that's what we need. Our conference has to be competitive. We have to put up a good show. We have to show, if we want respect, we have to go out here and get it. We have to show that we can win these type of games. And so I've been just extremely happy to see the growth of our game from the time I came into the conference.
Yeah, no, it has been really fun to watch. And I want to backtrack for a second as well and talk about recruiting because, one of the interviews that I'd seen from you prior, you mentioned, you when you're recruiting, especially in mentioning the portal, like, you bring in a lot of players that are on their last chance. I believe that was your quote. How does that change the way that you coach, or how did you kind of adopt that approach at first? Because I think again, like you can rattle off any number of stories from people that have come through your program. And clearly you've had a tremendous impact on them and likewise for them on you. But like, how did you kind of embody that? And yeah.
So that's a really good question. That certainly was not a trend that I was trying to take on.
Yeah.
But by the time I got my second player who had some of the same issues, they came in together, and I was like, okay, God, you have a huge sense of humor. Like, this may be a little bit more than I can chew. And so, as I work with the players, their development off the floor, their development on the floor, I saw that my staff and I was truly impacting these athletes and showing these athletes that they have so much more to offer and so much more inside of them. And you could see their lifestyles changing, and the people in their circles began to change, and their families began to be extremely appreciative and supportive. I mean, it was just outstanding. And so I took on a challenge of it's okay, this player got put out the team for doing A, B, C, D. Well, that's okay. Bring her over here. Let me give her a chance. And sometimes they come in and they mess that chance up. It's okay. I'll give you another chance. You give them another chance. And after a while, it works. Now, some players never learn. And that's the part I had to learn myself. What happens to the ones that never learn? Do you keep jeopardizing your program, the culture, and who you and what you stand for? And so that's when it's like, okay, Tomekia, you can't save everybody. So we have lost some players along the way because they refuse to change, but not because I lost patience in helping them develop into a good person. So that was just kind of something that came to me. And what I noticed every year, I was getting, tough players. I was getting players who coaches had put off the team, but they were good players. And we were able to really turn it around for those kids. And so that, for me, is a lot of gratification. And it makes me feel really good to be able to make an impact like that.
No, I really appreciate that because I was not a good player, to put it bluntly, but I did have to transfer a lot. So I can understand that in terms of like, I don't know. I think a lot of times people lose sight of like, yeah, somebody's 21 or 22, but dude, like I just think about where I'm at now at 26. I still am learning so much. Like I feel like, yes, I'm an adult, but when I look back at where I was at like 19 or 20, it's just I don't know. I think it's so easy to see like narratives get picked up on kids and like, yeah, people make mistakes, but also like it's important to remember that they're 19 or 20. Like it's not easy to just put everything on somebody like that. It takes time. You have to learn. And so yeah, no, I appreciate that because it's a lot easier said than done to give people a chance sometimes. Um, Speaking of too, you tweeted about this today. The Reds. I need to know about the Reds because this is one of my favorite jerseys in basketball. Is it out? Because I that would make me extremely sad if I don't get to see the red jersey
I
again this year.
know. I just saw online that our president was wanting to do away with the red uniforms.
No.
When I coached basketball here years ago, maybe 15, 17 years ago as an assistant coach, we had red as an accent color.
Hmm.
So we would just put small pieces of red in our uniforms. Well, when Coach Prime came over, well, it was before Prime. I think, excuse me, a football coach tried to bring the red in, and they quickly told him no. And then years later, Coach Prime came in, Deion Sanders, and he brought the red back. So we were extremely excited about that. And so we won a lot of games in our red uniforms. And depending on the opponents, my players are like, Coach, we want to put that red on today. So, I'm like, okay, when they say that, I know what time it is. And so that's going to be a struggle for us because that red has a great significance. And um, we put a lot of pride there in having that extra color with our program. Every school, most all D1 schools have 3 colors that they are going to these days. Today's a new day, and not many people are sticking with one color. So I'm hoping this is something that we could bring back to the table to consider. So certainly I wanted to let people know that's going to be a tough thing for us to get rid of that red.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna have to work on getting a petition started because I agree. I do not. I don't want to see the red go away because it's such a gorgeous uniform. And then lastly, too, Jackson is entered into the WNBA draft. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen on draft night. I think she has a great chance to be a pro, regardless of whether that's the W or going over to Europe. When you get to think about what her impact has been the last couple of years since coming to Jackson State and how excited you are for her to take this next step, what maybe stands out most to you about Angel?
Angel came in, I knew she was a pro. Just the way she played. Angel is really good in the pro areas on the floor. She's a center that can play on the outside, and that's the WNBA dream.
Hmm.
Their centers, if you can pull a big away from the basket to shoot or drive around, that's a major plus. And I think Angel has that component in her game. And so I've just been really impressed with that piece. But when Daphne White went out, who was our true center back to the basket post, when she went out with the injury, I was really nervous. So I changed my offense a little bit because Angel was good back to the basket, but Angel would rather face up. And so I changed my system a little bit. And Angel came to me and she said, Coach, go back to running the plays you ran for Daphne. She said, I can do it. I got you. And so when we did that, and she was phenomenal. I mean, she handled the contact down low. I can just remember the very last game against UConn playing against Edwards, an All-American, a first round draft pick. She will be. Angel, held her own. She wasn't afraid. She wanted that ball down the block. She went to work, and so I'm just really proud of how her game has transitioned to a total player, back to the basket and being able to play away from the basket. She has worked out in front of some scouts. And so, it's looking positive for her. So we are hoping that if nothing happened on the draft board, that she can go into some workouts and be able to be seen that way.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to see that for her and obviously excited to see what you guys keep doing in the summer, which coming up soon. It does not feel like it's April, but it is April, so we're coming up on it. But Tomekia, I really appreciate your time. It was great getting to know you. I really appreciate everything you do and how you handle the program and just approach basketball. So thank you again for making the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. To everyone listening, thank you for listening. And most importantly, have a great rest of your day.